Okay, so I'm not going to give you no magic bullets. I can start by saying that we have been looking for the elixir of eternal youth for many hundreds of years, and I don't have it to share this evening, but I have some good stuff that works also. So between the years 600 and 900 AD, the Chinese were very keen on being youthful forever. And they had alchemists, much like the pharmacy down the road, Care Press, which prepared concoctions to keep you eternally young. Of the 22 emperors in that period of time, 6 died from self-poisoning, taking these concoctions, which had mercury, arsenic, gold, sulfur in them, all incredibly toxic. But what was remarkable to me, it was the most sophisticated period of culture in Chinese history at the time, and yet it took 300 years for the penny to drop. And then, of course, what the emperor did, their noblemen did. So there was a number of deaths in the search. So that's the first thing. And I was reminded of that during the last COVID outbreak, because I remember Donald Trump standing up at one stage declaring that probably if we swallowed disinfectant, do you remember it, the bleach? And do you remember Fauci's face going, oh God, he didn't say anything, but you could see his hand. Wow, there you go. Pity you didn't. Anyway, so what a remarkable thing has been happening worldwide. This isn't just the Western civilization, but worldwide. But these are from countries which have very good records of death. That between 1800 and 2000, we have been living longer by 2.5 years every 10 years. In a linear way, it's continuing over the last 200 years. So here, you could have expected to live until about 37, 38. Now, if you like, you can live at least 2 lifetimes compared to that one lifetime. And it seems to be continuing. That translates into the following. A baby girl born this year will on average live 3 months longer than her sister, born last year. Irish twins, 2 in 1 year. But one will live longer. So that's how that translates. Now, for most of humanity, about 3 to 4% of people lived over 65, right back to the Greeks. However, now we've got 22%. Almost 1 in 4 people in Germany are over 65, 26% in Japan, 19% in England, we're 15% in Ireland, but we're the fastest aging country in Europe at the moment. Because our population was young, but now they're getting older, and they've come into that age bracket, and they will be. We've 800,000 people over 65 in Ireland as we speak. So that's nearly 1 million, say. In 5 years' time, we'll have another 800,000 over the age of 70. 5 years after that, we'll have another 800,000 over the age of 75. So I've just come from my clinics. I'm a doctor, and our emergency departments during the winter months have been heaving. The summer months, that was never the way. It was always a winter thing where the emergency department was full. It's been full all this summer. That is one of the consequences of the aging demography. We get iller, we get comorbidities is what it's called, we get disorders, diseases, which need to be treated, etc. But that's the future we're all looking at, unless we can think of other ways of managing our own health, empowering ourselves, but also changing models of healthcare delivery. And I really think that we need as a society to start having discussions about this. What is the right way to deliver good healthcare to people as we get older? The biggest increase is going to be in people over the age of 100, proportionately. When I was a young junior doctor, if a 100-year-old came onto the ward, we'd all go up to have a look. Because it was so unusual to see somebody of that age. But now it is no longer unusual. There'll be a big increase, almost a 200% increase in those over 85, and a 400% in the number of people living globally over 100. Why? Why are we living longer? Better housing, better medical health care, better technologies, better quality of water over the last 100 years. The biggest change that has influenced living longer is actually clean water, as well as less cramped conditions. But clean water is huge. We take it for granted now, but it was a major factor in living longer. Now, so I run a study that Mary kindly mentioned, Tilda, the Irish Longitudinal Study of Aging. We're just down on Pearse Street, and we see 9,000 people every 2 years for detailed assessments, the same people. When I say detailed assessments, if you just stop and think for a moment, no one thing shapes your experience of aging. It's a tapestry of your life experiences, which influence your experience, your perception of how you're aging, but also your aging health. All of these things influence it. Your genes, your physical health, your mental health. Depression is bad for physical health. Income. People who are financially well off are less likely to be ill than people who have issues with respect to making ends meet consistently. Your work, your retirement, your marital status, household structure, I mean how many kids etc. in the house, education, social participation, getting together like you are today, hugely influential on the aging process, and family networks, etc. So, we have 9,000 people in the study. We see the same people every 2 years. It's a random sample. So, we got 30,000 random addresses from the SRI. We went to those houses all over Ireland. We knocked on the doors and asked, is there anybody over 50 in the house? Yea or nay? If so, would you like to take part in a study on aging? We'll reassess you every 2 years for at least the next 10 years and maybe longer. Remarkably, the response rate to that was 67%. Isn't that amazing? In France and Germany, it's between 30 and 40%. 67% in Ireland. Now, when we actually did that, it was 2007, 2008. The recession had happened. And my reading of it is that people of over 50 in Ireland wanted to give back to the younger generation, wanted to feed research and activity in this space. We were hemorrhaging, I don't know if you remember, young people again, with emigration at the time. But they've remained with our study. We don't lose people except through death, pretty much, because we follow these community people, when it happens, into nursing homes, if that's what their trajectory is. So that's the experience of aging. We've published over 600 papers and 100 reports. The study is now very much embedded in the mindset of policymakers. We've been cited over 100 times in the Oireachtas, which is good. Because what we're doing is we're providing real evidence on the experience of aging. Before we started the study, all of the information that social and health models were being derived from in Ireland, including our hospitals, including our acute services, everything, were based on Scottish data. And the assumptions were that that would actually translate to Irish data. But of course, that didn't make any sense because they've got a singular model of healthcare delivery, the NHS. We're mixed models, very different. Anyway, so great data set. And we're only down the road. And now that I've kind of come here, I'm thinking, why don't we have an open day where you can come and experience the very detailed health assessment, as well as some of the other assessments that we give down the road? It'd be fun. Okay, so we inform policy with that information, novel research, and now there are now 26 similar studies worldwide on aging. And we hosted them in Trinity here at the end of August, the principal investigators. And we've made all of our studies so that the core information we're collecting is the same in all of the studies. So I can tell you what that particular feature looks like in China, what it looks like in Brazil, what it looks like in America, what it looks like in France, etc. So that's the outcome from that study. Right. Why do we age? And why do we age at different rates? We don't all age at the same rate. I hope I'm not offending any new mothers in the audience, but all babies look the same, pretty much, don't they? Compared to these 62-year-old men, that was their age at the time these photographs were taken. the same age. They are different, aren't they? Now some, of course, have had a little surgical assistance, no doubt. Some haven't, clearly. But so that's what I mean by we're very different. We age differently. And we start off pretty much the same. We really do, in terms of our biology. But because of life experiences and all of that tapestry of things I told you that we gather information from in the Tilda study, that influences how we age. And actually, how you look, how long you look, correlates pretty well with your biological aging. By that I mean how old your cells really are. Now, I told you I'm a doctor, and I've had a patient not too long ago. He was 69, overweight, smoking a lot, and drinking excessively. So we had the conversation. I do cardiovascular medicine, so I'm interested in the heart and blood pressure, all that sort of thing. So I kind of had a conversation about the risk factors and really how he had to modify his lifestyle, you know, for his own health, and so that he could, you know, extend a healthy lifespan, given that he was 69. And he said, "I have nothing to worry about, doctor. My mother lived till she was 94, and my father, she was 89. So he thought he could smoke and drink the bit out because of his genes." Well, was he right? Was he right? He was not. We know that genes are only, in fact, responsible for 20% of lifespan. The rest is our behaviours. Isn't that great, though? Because it means we can modify, we can do something about our behaviours, right? We can't do anything about your genes, pretty much. But we can change the other factors. That's why I'm really keen to start talking to school kids and young people about this, because the earlier you start with good behaviours, health behaviours, and the things we know work, the better. We know that it's only 20% from twin studies. Twins, identical twins, have exactly the same genes. And if you follow them through their life course, they age differently biologically. So we know their genes are exactly the same, but it's the other factors which are changing how they age. And that's most of our information in this whole area has come from that. I'm going to show you a video which is fun. Now, believe it or not, a lot of the good research in this area is done on a worm called C. elegans, and the worm is the size of that comma there. We share loads of genes with worms. Obviously, the worm doesn't complain should you modify or change or alter its genes. So that's a great opportunity for us to explore different genes and see if you tweak that gene, if you mutate that gene, does it influence the aging process? And just to show you, this is one of the first ones that was modified. What you would see there is a vibrant, young, healthy worm making its way across the screen. That's what the video shows you. They only live 14 days. This is a 14-year-old day one, and it's almost stagnant, hardly moving at all. And the shadow there is a finger prodding it to move. So it's really frail, hardly moving at all. That's a 14-day-old worm. Now I'm going to show you another 14-day-old worm. And all that the laboratory scientists did was change the temperature of the environment that the worm had grown up in. And that worm, you're not going to be able to see it now, was rushing its way across the video, very fit and very well. We're not going to start altering people's genes, but double the lifespan in the worm with just tweaking the temperature that the worm had been brought up in, if you like. So there are ways, we do know genes, that if they're mutated or changed, do lead to longer lifespan. But of course, the science is nowhere nearly close enough to allowing that to happen in humans yet, because there are other consequences of changing somebody's gene. However, our boys, their heterogeneity or differences were modified by what's called environmental factors. That's the other 80% of why we age. And some of them are great fun. We can measure the biological aging, the cell aging of those 6 characters by looking at a cell. We've trillions of cells in the body, and actually looking at little sites in one portion of the cell, which are the sites which give instruction for protein production and energy production in the cell. Because all we're about is producing energy and getting rid of the toxic byproduct from energy. That's all every single one of our cells is focused on. So by measuring those things, we can actually measure our clocks, our biological clocks. This is why I said to you earlier on that this message really needs to get out early. This is the Dunedin study. Unlike Tilda, where we start at age 50 and follow people through every 2 years thereafter, Dunedin started at birth. They had 1,000 babies at birth. They've been following them for 40 years. And they measured their biological clock, their aging clock of their cells. So they're all the same age. We call that chronological age. But their biological age was hugely different. All 38. Some of them were behaving like 26-year-olds, biologically. Some of them were behaving almost like 50-year-olds, biologically. And the factors which influenced the accelerated or the faster aging in these relatively young adults were bad experiences in childhood, drug abuse, excessive smoking, alcohol, etc. So we know that that biological aging change actually happens really early on. And I don't think that message is out there. This is the fun bit. These are the things that we also know influence biological aging. And they were previously thought to be very soft science. It has to be about taking drugs, or it has to be about exercise, or it has to be about diet. Of course, diet and exercise are hugely important. Would you believe that the quality of your relationship has a strong influence on your cellular aging process? If you have good quality relationships, good friendships, good people that you can share issues and problems with, and it's like a de-stressing thing, that is hugely beneficial to inflammation, which is the background cellular activity that speeds up the aging process. Stress is hugely negative to cells, so any de-stressing rituals are very important. Like breathing programs, like meditation, like yoga. Previously, as I said, this was thought to be soft science. We now know that looking in the laboratory, we can actually tell the difference between people who take part in de-stressing rituals and people who don't. And actually, there are studies which have looked before de-stressing, do whatever meditation or whatever for a period of time, and afterwards, and seeing the beneficial changes. Imagine that having a purpose in life makes a difference. Getting up in the morning and knowing why you get up actually influences your aging process. And creativity does. Looking at inflammation in people who are creative makes it changes the aging profile. Okay, so let's look at a few of those in detail. They all affect inflammation. You'll have heard of the blue zones. These are 5 zones around the world where a disproportionately higher number of people live to 100 or more than on the mainland, like Loma Linda, Nicoya, Costa Rica, Sardinia, Ikaria in Greece, and Okinawa. There's actually a Netflix series on at the moment about this, Dan Butler. So these are the blue zones. They were discovered by Michel Poulain back in the late 1960s. Do you know why they're called blue zones? This is really, really complex science. He had a blue marker at the time. This is true. So he did all of this work, and then he put a blue ring around the area, so there's a blue zones. Okay, so the thing that's really interesting about those zones is that people don't just live longer, but they live longer with healthier lives. They're less likely to get dementia. They're less likely to get arthritis. They're less likely to get hypertension. They're less likely to get kidney disease. They're less likely to get heart failure. So there's been a lot of studies in the blue zones to try and unpack why is that, what it is about the blue zones, and it's not genes. It doesn't appear to be genes. One of the things is that walking, exercise, movement is part of their entire day. So their day isn't sitting for a long time at a computer, then getting up, doing an hour in the gym, and then back sitting again. But movement and activity is actually built in to the day, and particularly moving in nature. The other thing is, I love this experiment on gardening and de-stressing. And this is why I think really that it matters to be able to access gardens in an inner city. Allotments are so very important. They're popular in England, but we don't really have that much access to allotments here. So this was an experiment where one half of the people involved in the experiment did gardening, and the other half just relaxed reading. And they measured all of their stress markers, hormones and neurological markers, before either of those activities and after, and found that both of them reduced the stress markers, but this one significantly more. And we now know there's even a microbacterium, a bacteria in soil, which increases serotonin in the system. And serotonin is the pathway we use with antidepressants, etc., with some drugs which enhance relaxation. And this is a similar experiment. Everybody knows exercise is good, but exercise in nature is even better. So they looked at the same walking length on a treadmill in a room or through a forest. And both were beneficial to neurohormone systems, but this one more so. So engaging in activities in nature seems to have an added benefit. And if you're going to have activities, that should be a purpose. And this comes to the community thing. The Loma Linda is an Adventist group. And we've looked at religion in Ireland, and it's actually quite difficult to disaggregate or to separate. Is it the religion and the spirituality itself? Or is it the fact that you're sharing and volunteering and engaging with other people on a regular basis, and even the relaxation and de-stressing of religious services, etc.? It's very hard to say that, but people in Ireland who regularly engage in religion are significantly less likely to be depressed. So it is an observation. That's so in Loma Linda. There's a lot of sharing of meals and activities during the day, but what they use afternoon prayer for is community and de-stressing. A fixed period of time every afternoon. And it probably adds 4 to 14 years to lifespan, which is pretty remarkable. The world's longest lived people in the blue zones and in other zones all have close friends and strong social networks. And often loved ones living in the home, so that the home isn't, you're not on your own, isolated, but there's activity and others in the home. And I'll come back to that in a moment. This is the moment. I thought it was the next one. A friend of mine went to Sardinia, she was a social scientist, to explore what is the secret. And she was interviewing different people, and she sat with this 103-year-old man in his kitchen. And he was in this lovely little house, looking right onto the street in Sardinia. And their kitchen was here, and the street was there. And there were 3 generations living in the house. So she sat down in the kitchen to interview him, to chat to him. And she just couldn't get a word in edgeways. It was the most fragmented interview, because it was being constantly interrupted by people coming down, the younger ones, teenagers, getting up at 11 instead of 6 like the granddad or great-granddad. But the people were always coming up and down the house, the relatives. The house was a hive of activity, of variety, engagement. Not only that, but people who were passing never passed without popping in to say hello to and having a chat. I said the funny thing was that one woman popped in and they had this very animated discussion, and then she left, and he said, "I can't stand her." So I guess what I'm saying is that she described it to me, she said, "I felt like I was sitting in a train station." That's how active the whole thing. He hadn't time to think of anything, because he was getting so much engagement and social interaction and variety and curiosity. And he was, of course, absorbing all of the news from the village, etc. That's really important. And there have been lots of studies showing how important social relationships are. They are actually, this is a big meta-analysis of over 300,000 people, they're as important to our heart health as smoking, physical activity, and alcohol excess. Having good quality social relationships and friendships, which is why a community-based venture like this is so very important, to enable community engagement. And in Tilda, we've also shown that volunteering and social participation and looking after grandchildren are associated with a much higher quality of life in those who have the privilege of all of that, and much less likely to be depressed. And less disability. By disability I mean diseases. And we now know that that's because there's less inflammation in the system. Inflammation is very good if you get a bacterial infection or a viral infection. We need our inflammatory system to buck up and to kick the virus or bacteria out of the system, but then it should go back to normal again. The inflammation that's associated with disability or physical ill health that isn't infective or stress is a chronic background inflammation, and that's actually toxic to cells. And we know that volunteering particularly reduces that background inflammation. Laughter is awfully important. We've evolved, laughter is a form of social communication. All animals laugh. Even a rat. That's not my hand, because I can't stand it. And even, you can tickle a rat and get a response from it. Think about social bonding and laughter. You can't tickle yourself. You wouldn't start laughing if you tickled yourself. And you certainly wouldn't start laughing if you're walking down the street and somebody stops you and starts to tickle you, but you didn't know. But actually, if you know somebody and they tickle you, that's a form of social bonding, and then laughter ensues, etc. So all of that is a bonding experience. Children laugh 400 times a day, 3 and 4 year olds. We don't as we get older, and yet it's so good as a de-stressor. And it's partly why social engagement and having good friendships and having a good laugh with your friends actually is so good for the inflammatory system, because you're laughing so much. And laughter is a really good medicine. Having a purpose, knowing why you get up in the morning. In the blue zones, they actually have special names. The Okinawans call it Ikege. The Nicoyans call it Plan de Vida. Knowing why you wake up in the morning makes you healthier, happier, and adds 7 years to your life. Now, a lot of people, when they retire, or when their grandchildren or children emigrate or whatever, feel they no longer have purpose. But you can make purpose. You can make a list in the morning, even shopping, even meeting people for coffee, even that's purpose. You have to create a purpose. Don't get up in a vacuum in the morning, not knowing what the day will hold. Make it hold something. Work on it, however simple. I tell my husband washing the dishes is purpose. Be sure to put that on your list. So downtime is also important, and any of you who saw the Netflix movie will know that every single one of those blue zones have actual de-stressing rituals. I told you about Loma Linda with the prayer in the afternoons. The Nicoyans go to the afternoon nap. The Sardinians, with friends, have a glass or two of red wine every afternoon. That's their de-stressing ritual. The Okinawans drink green tea, but again with others, and think about ancestors, etc. But whatever your de-stressing ritual, that should be part of your purpose in the morning when you're getting up. What is my de-stressing ritual today going to be? Preferably do it with friends. In fact, all of them, except the ones who go for an afternoon nap, do it with other people. so that it's worth actually making a list of those. Food. Well, I'm death on ultra-processed foods, and if you look at all of the blue zones, their diets are low in sugar, low in added salt, low in refined grains. So anything which is packaged, anything which is in a wrapper, is processed, ultra-processed, is refined. That's the bottom line. If you look at the list on the back of things, if you don't have it in your kitchen, all the ingredients, then it's ultra-processed. Now, I've been particularly looking at this every time I see a package of something recently, and it can be really hard to navigate some of them because there are only 4 to 10 companies worldwide, but a big 4, which are actually responsible for the majority of our ultra-processed foods. Nestle is one of them, Kellogg's is one of them, etc. All of the cereals we eat in the morning that aren't porridge are ultra-processed. And a giveaway of ultra-processed is high fibre, high energy. That means that they've added things. Let me explain a little bit more about ultra-processed. They're very addictive is the other thing. If you get a bar of Dairy Milk chocolate And you say, okay, I'm just going to have 1 square. And you compare your reaction to that was carrots. I'm just going to have 1 carrot. You won't feel like having another carrot. but Sod's law is that you'll have finished the bar of chocolate, because the 1 square, I'll have another, and another. They make them. They're made so that we're addictive, so that they give us pleasure, so that they stimulate the pleasure center in the brain, and we feel like more. Ultra-processed foods do that. 57% at a population level of entire food intake in the UK, we don't know about Ireland, is ultra-processed. That's the average. Some children are eating over 90% of their entire food intake is ultra-processed. So look, this is a fairly new science. The fact that we know how bad it is for us, for health, for healthy aging particularly, but also for kids and childhood obesity, is pretty new stuff. And it is hard to navigate, because it's in the company's interest that you can't, and to make the packages really complex. But just remember what I've said. If it's in a package, if it's a brand, it's ultra-processed. What's not ultra-processed are apples, oranges, fresh fruit and vegetables, olive oil, etc. Ultra-processed, no matter what it is, you show me anything, it's made up of either wheat, rice, corn, soya, 4 plants only, lamb, pork, chicken, beef, 4 animals only, sunflower or palm oil. And what they do is they break down those products and they repurpose them to look like whatever you're eating, the energy bar or whatever. And they add colourings and flavourings, etc. after that. It's an illusion of having a choice. There is no choice. It's this. Our gut needs variety. Gut love, the microbiome, the bacteria in the gut, loves loads of variety. The more variety, the better. Now, if a person goes into a nursing home, within 3 weeks of going into the nursing home, the microbiome has completely receded in its variety. It becomes bland, with hardly any selection of different bacteria. The more bacteria in your microbiome, the better. These are good bacteria. And that's because in nursing homes there's no stimulation, there's a lot of social isolation, you're no longer in your familiar environment, and the food is all the same. So we need variety for our gut. And the other thing is that in the blue zones, they never eat everything on the plate. I'm sure many of you grew up as I did, and mothers saying to you, finish up everything. There's a child somewhere who'd love to have that. Potato or carrot or whatever. And you think, well, give it to them because they really don't want it. But they all eat to 80% satiation. Now, it's a very interesting science that also influences inflammation. These 2 rhesus monkeys are exactly the same age. This was a study that was done a few years ago, where they took a group of rhesus monkeys. They were all living in the same environment in a lovely island off Nicoya, and half the monkeys, their food intake was reduced by 40% for 20 years. These are both 20-year-old, and then the others could eat and do whatever they want, right? So which of those do you think had the food reduction, the 20%? A or C? Hands up for A. Okay, and then the rest of you are C. I'll show you from the side because it's actually better from the side. Now, they do not look like 2 monkeys that are the same age. This fella's up for it. Look at his back is straight and the tail is up, and he's so much more hair. He looks younger compared to this one. He's lost hair, he's humped, and actually if you go back to the picture, you can see the mouth is like that. You can see the nostrils are bigger. They're all age-related changes that we all get. You can see that the nose has receded here. Yeah? So he has all of, and there isn't as much hair. Whereas this one looks angry. Okay, so there's quite a lot of research now suggesting actually that calorie restriction is beneficial, or certainly not overeating, and the blue zones share that. Now, it might be hard for some people to adopt that all of the time. There are caloric mimics, in other words, supplements we can take, which mimic caloric restriction, and more of these are coming on the market. Resveratrol is the most popular. You can buy it over the Holland & Barrett, for example. Metformin is a diabetic drug, which looked promising initially, but actually I don't think the science is following it. Quercetin and quercetin you can also buy, you get them in supplements. They're polyphenols. And they're beneficial in the context of the microbiome, but also reduce absorption of bad carbohydrates. Rapamycin is probably what the Chinese should have had in 600 to 900 that we talked about earlier on. It's looking the most promising in terms of an aging drug. However, at the moment we use it, if you're getting chemotherapy with cancer, you get this as well. It just helps the cells to recover. It's not safe enough for people to take for aging. It's not licensed for that at the moment. But I suppose I'm saying this, that there are drugs out there which people are exploring now. And in fact, there's been some nice studies showing with growth hormone and metformin and this other drug, DHEA, that you can actually reduce aging by a year. How many cold water swimmers in the audience? Yay! I could tell that by looking at you. It's very, very good for you. It really is very good for you. Now, if you find, I can't cold water swim every day, I would love to, but I do it at weekends. But if you find I don't fancy swimming, and it really is good, it's very good for the stress system, noradrenergic system, the immune system. There are a lot of benefits with it. Cold showers have a very similar effect. Cold shower in the morning, few minutes. Doesn't have to a few seconds. Doesn't have to be for a long period of time. But extend the period just by 2 seconds each morning if you can. Vitamin D. Now I know Cleona said last week that there was no evidence for vitamin D. Doctors differ and patients die. I don't agree with that. First of all, from the Tilda study, we know that vitamin D deficiency is very common in Ireland. We don't get enough of direct sun exposure, particularly in the over 50s. Something like 70% of people over the age of 70 have deficiency, not just low levels, but deficient. They don't have enough for bone health, for muscle health, which it definitely works for. During COVID, we did a lot of experiments with colleagues in England who are interested in vitamin D, and found that if you had high normal levels of vitamin D, now over and above the recommended doses for bone and muscle, you were less likely to be admitted to hospital with COVID, less likely to be admitted to the intensive care unit, and less likely to die. So it does appear to have some protective effects. The problem with vitamin D is, what we would like to do then is, okay, proper randomized control trial. This half, you're going to run low vitamin D levels, and you're going to do it for a year. No supplementation, low all of the time. This half, we're going to supplement you, bring your vitamin D levels right up. Not ethical. And you lot will find out what they're doing, and you'll start taking vitamin D. We can't govern it. You can't actually police that sort of a randomized control trial with a supplement like that. There's no harm in taking it. 1,000 international units a day. That's what I take myself. That's the best evidence. And certainly in Ireland, we are deficient. And I love this bit, and I'm kind of going to finish on this. How you perceive yourself aging actually influences the aging process. Again, we've shown this in a number of papers in Tilda. This is an experiment with psychology students, where one half of the class was given positive stereotypes, like say this half. Accomplished, advised, alert, astute, creative, enlightened, guidance, improving, insightful, learned, sage. So you were asked to dwell on those words. The other half of the class were asked to dwell on these words: Alzheimer's, confused, negative, declined, decrepit, dementia, dependent, diseases, dying, forgets, incompetent, misplaces, senile. Before they were exposed, again they had bloods taken and nerve studies done to get their baseline stress kind of levels. And then after they were exposed to these, and as well there were video cameras they didn't know about, which watched how fast they walked out after the experiment. So this lot, bounced out of it, very impressive. This lot actually walked significantly more slowly than they'd walked in, and more slowly than this group who'd been exposed to positive things. And there are now loads of experiments to show that perception matters. In the Tilda study we've shown, people who feel younger than their chronological age, say they're 60 or 70, they say, I feel 40. They actually age more slowly. Isn't that interesting? Their physical walking, their disease accumulation, their mental health, cognitively, memory, learning, planning is better, adjusted for all other factors, than people who feel their age at baseline. So don't be ashamed. Now, I love this. This is a story, this is my last slide, from Inishmore in the Aran Islands. It's a true story of a woman aged 100 who was being interviewed by a fantastic interviewer, Cathal O'Shannon. And he said to her, "You've reached the ripe old age and you've never been bedridden." And she replied indignantly, "Oh yes, I have, several times, and once in a canoe." She wrote her memoirs aged 103 and died aged 109. I'm showing it because, God, what a great, positive, fun outlook that woman had. I'm part of a WhatsApp group of doctors, and I sent this in, and one of the doctors responded, who had been a GP on the Aran Islands, the only GP on the Aran Islands, for 40 years. She just retired last year. And her response to me was, "Oh, that'll be our breach." So isn't it lovely that, Bridget Durain was her name, but that she knew her patients so well, and she understood. And I loved the way she said "our breach" as a GP. There you go, thank you.